to the entertainment Talking Sports.
What is going on, baseball fans? Back at it with another New York Mets video, and I'm going to have a lot more New York Mets video in season. I plan to have, a few up for sure during spring training as I get back into the mode of baseball. Of course, I cover the New York Giants a lot, but I plan on trying to give you as much Met coverage as I can this year, along with streaming some Met games, and I'm actually really excited for this season, and I'm not going to let what happened with the Wilpons affect that, okay? I go into every year optimistic. I love baseball season. It's something I really look forward to as soon as football season is over. And I'm a huge Mets fan, and I cannot wait for this upcoming year. And I'm going to talk about the roster. I'm going to talk about the whole ownership situation. I'll talk about the new manager, Luis Rojas, and we'll get into all of it. We'll start with the ownership. Of course, that was a major, major story when the Wilpons decided to tell the world, I don't know if they went out of their way to tell the world, but told the world that they were selling the team to Cohen. Supposedly a deal was imminent. Cohen would have been the wealthiest owner in all of baseball, and the Mets would finally become a big market team in a big market city. Since the days of the Ponzi scheme, of course, the Wilpons have not spent at the rate that New York Mets have been accustomed to. The last time they signed a big-time contract, yes, Cespedes was pretty big, but a long-term big-time contract was Carlos Beltran. And they have not been a big-market team in New York for quite some time, and Mets fans have been calling for them to sell the team because of that. And the Wilpons supposedly are finally going to do that, and they had a deal in place with Cohen. Now, the rumor with that was that the deal, and I don't know all the specifics, but the deal was going to be fully through 5 years from now. Now, Cohen was going to take some ownership responsibility gradually. I think he would have more say in the team next year. But regardless, it fell through. And Met fans got, they went crazy. And I get it. I'm a Mets fan, okay? I'm very pessimistic about the Mets as well sometimes because, well, they give us a lot of heartache. Sometimes they build our hopes up. 2006, we're the best team in baseball. We can't win a World Series. 07, 08, we blow like 6 or 7 game leads. 2015, we go on this miracle run, and then, we make every error known to man to cost ourselves a World Series. So it seems like we always find a way to screw things up. So I get the mindset from the fan base about the Wilpons and, about everything else. But everything that has come out has been nothing but encouraging. If you actually look at it, from a fair perspective, everything that's come out is, after the fact, is that the Wilpons want to sell this team as soon as possible. So obviously, you're going to sit on your hands and knees and, pray and whatever else until they sell it. But it sounds like they want to get rid of the team. It sounds like whoever becomes the buyer will probably spend a lot more than they did, because if you're going to take over this team in this city and expect to spend the way they did taking ownership, out of the gate, the fans are going to hate you. So I think that anybody who takes over this team as the owner will spend, and they will spend a lot, and they will try to get this team back to where it belongs, where New York City wants them, which is a competitive baseball team year in and year out. The problem with the Mets is they usually give you 2 good years, and then they give you 10 bad ones. Last year, the Mets won 86 games, and it was about what I expected, going into the year. And I thought 86 games might be enough to get the second wild card. Of course, the Cardinals got hot, and the Mets missed the playoffs. But the Mets finished very strongly. And they had a number of injuries. They had some players underperform, specifically in the bullpen. And that will be the key to this season. But we're going to start with Luis Rojas. Of course, Carlos Beltran was originally named the new manager of the New York Mets. And the New York Mets decided to pass over guys like Joe Girardi, Dusty Baker, Buck Showalter. They wanted to go with a young and up-and-coming manager. My theory on that is they don't want somebody that's going to, have too much say. They want to have more control. Brody wants more say, and they basically want a puppet, because that is what Luis Rojas probably is, and that is what Beltran would have been. Beltran, of course, got caught up in the cheating scandal, and, he'll probably cost himself a shot at the Hall of Fame, and, he probably would have been, probably would have went in as a Met, and he would have been the second non-pitcher ever to go in with a Met uniform. That kind of sucks, but Beltran got what he deserved. He was part of one of the biggest scandals in the history of sports, and he will be suspended and probably cost himself a shot at the Hall of Fame. As far as Rojas goes, it's kind of ironic. He's the same age as Joe Judge. That's probably the last similarity. One guy's white, one guy's Spanish, one guy coaches football, one guy coaches baseball. One guy learned under the 2 greatest coaches in the history of the sport in Belichick and Saban. Rojas has learned from the Mets. But Rojas has been in the minor league system for a long time. And I think, if I remember correctly from what I read, he did win a Manager of the Year award in the minor leagues a number of years ago. So hopefully he has some talent. But I don't read too much into the manager with baseball. Yes, they can win a couple of games, and yes, it's very important the way they manage a bullpen. But manager baseball is probably the least important managerial or coach position in all four major sports. But regardless, you want a guy out there who knows what he's doing and who the players fight hard for. As bad as Terry Collins was in terms of managing the bullpen and X's and O's, one thing that I always credited him with was the players fought so hard for that man. And that, to me, is the most important attribute in a manager when it comes to baseball. And hopefully Rojas is that guy for the New York Mets. But we're going to have to give him a chance and see what the guy's got. But he's young, and that seems to be the movement in sports nowadays. But we'll see what Rojas has with this team. We're going to start with the pitching staff. And, when you think New York Mets historically, you think pitching. When the Mets are at their best, they've got top-tier pitching. And this year should be no different. In the bullpen, I am optimistic about. Of course, I was optimistic about the bullpen last year, and they failed miserably, but we'll get into that in a minute. As far as the starting rotation goes, they're pretty loaded here. You got Jacob Degrom coming off of 2 straight Cy Youngs. You could argue he's the best pitcher in all of baseball. He's still got at least 2-3 great years left in him, if not more, hopefully. Of course, the Mets signed him to that big contract last year, and I'm excited to see what DeGrom has. Hopefully it's a three-peat, but as he goes, the Mets will go. If he stays healthy, continues to pitch the way he does, he's going to give us a chance to compete in the National League East. Of course, the National League East is a very tough division. You've got the Phillies coming back. Last year they underperformed, but they have a lot of talent. The Braves arguably have, one of the most talented teams in the sport. You got the Nationals, defending champions. So it will not be easy to make the playoffs in this division, but the Mets certainly have the talent to do so. It's going to come down to winning the close games, and a lot of that will have to do with the bullpen and the defense. Next guy up in the rotation, of course, is Noah Syndergaard. Noah Syndergaard has as much talent as anybody, but he's been somewhat inconsistent throughout his career. If he can get back to his old form and pitch like another ace, which is basically what he should be, you got a dynamic 1-2 punch up at the top of that rotation, followed by Marcus Stroman, who's a very strong number 3. He actually pitched a lot better than I think people gave him credit for with the Mets. Not that he pitched great, but he had like a mid to high 3 ERA. If he can pitch in the mid 3s, I'll be happy with that. And we'll see what the guy's got. But he was a very good pitcher for the Blue Jays before the Mets acquired him. And we'll see what Stroman has. I believe he's a free agent after this year, so he's got incentive to try to pitch as well as he can. So I'm really excited about the top 3. Then you got Steven Matz. Matz, to me, throughout his career, Matz has been a pitcher who he'll give you 5 good innings, but he never pitches deep into games, which is why I always thought he might be better suited for the bullpen. And maybe the Mets will like to do that this year, but I think going into the season, he's probably going to be penciled in as the number 4. And then you have the 2 free agent acquisitions, Rick Porcello and Michael Wacha. I think one will obviously go to the bullpen, the other will be in the rotation. I like Porcello a lot. He didn't pitch well last year in the American League, but he does have talent. And I think he's a great number 5, or, we'll see if Wacha wins it. But that'll be the battle there in spring training for the 5th spot. The other will go to the bullpen. And that now will take us to the bullpen, which to me is the X factor this year for the New York Mets. If the Mets are going to have a good year this year, they're going to need this bullpen to step up. And obviously the big offseason acquisition was the former Yankee Dellin Betances, who the Mets signed to a 1-year prove-it contract. Betances will try to strike it big. So it's another player on in a contract year. So he's incentivized to try to put forth a great season. And Betances has been great in the past. He struggled with some control, but he's a dominant pitcher out of the bullpen, and he adds to a lot of talent in the bullpen. Now the talent severely underperformed last year, and the Mets are going to need guys like Edwin Diaz, who was the relief man of the year. When the Mets traded for him, he's still very young with the Mariners. Last year he was horrible, and the same with Familia. They will need Diaz and Familia to get back to their old form if they want to compete for a World Series this year, or even the playoffs. So that will be the key to this team. Of course, you still have Lugo with that dynamic curveball in the bullpen, which is where I think he should stay. Robert Gsellman as well as Justin Wilson. So I think the Mets have the potential to have a great bullpen. The question is, will they? It's easier said than done. We'll see what the Mets could put forth this year, but I'm looking forward to see what they have. And that will now bring us to the infield, and I'll talk about the outfield all in one. We'll talk about the position players all together, but we'll start in the infield. The catcher, they're pretty set there with the Bull. He's a good hitter. Got to work on the defense a little bit, but he's a solid hitter behind the backstop, coming in at 32 years old. You got J.D. Davis. It'll be interesting to see where he plays. He's kind of a jack of all trades player, but he broke out last year with the Mets. Was a great player for the Mets, and I was glad that they brought him back. I think he'll get some time in the outfield. He'll get some time at third base. We'll see if he could build off of last season for the Mets. Brandon Nimmo, back from injury. He's a good on-base guy. Not my favorite player in the team, but if you're a sabermetrics guy, you probably like Nimmo a little bit more than me. But he's infectious, right? He's a locker room guy. That smile, you love it. Glad to see him healthy, and hopefully he can bring something to this team in the outfield. But we'll go back to the infield. I got a little carried away there with the outfield. Back to the infield. We were talking about J.D. Davis, so that kind of brought me to the outfield. Pete Alonso, of course, coming off a 53 home run season, broke the rookie record. Of course, the balls were a little juiced, but regardless, Pete Alonso got off to as good of a start as you could have ever hoped for a Mets rookie, and he will be the man that we build this lineup around. And, I expect him to have no less than 40 home runs this year. I think he's a great power hitter, and, we'll see what he's got, but he will be the big guy in this lineup. Jeff McNeil, of course, that guy is a great player, and you're going to have to find room for him. The best pure hitter on this team. He could play some second. He could play some third. He'll play wherever you want him to play as long as he's in the lineup. That is what's most important. But, he's projected to be the second baseman. We'll see where they find some time for Robinson Cano. Of course, he was the big acquisition last year. He was a big disappointment. And looking at this infield with J.D. Davis, who could play some third, you've got Jed Lowry coming back, who was hurt all of last year. Of course, Jeff McNeil, Pete Alonso. So it's going to be hard for Cano to find some time. I'm sure he'll probably get at least 300 ABs, and we'll see what he's got. Of course, you got Dom Smith, who's played some outfield, as well as, giving the Mets the ability for him to play first base on a day that you want to give Alonso off. So it's a pretty deep lineup. And, of course, Ahmed Rosario at the shortstop, who I think could be in for a big year. I'm a big fan of Rosario. I think that he really took a step forward offensively for the Mets last year. He's got to work on the glove. He's been a bit disappointing there. But I do think Ahmed Rosario could be an all-star this year. That's how high I am on him. I'm really looking forward to what Rosario has. And going back to the outfield, we spoke on Nimmo Conforto. Conforto's been a player who has shown you spurts, kind of like an Ike Davis, but a much better version. But I remember when Ike Davis first came up, he gave you like half seasons where he was great. Conforto's been very similar to that, but he's been consistent in the fact that he does it every year. Ike Davis really only gave you 2 years. Conforto's kind of got to try to string together a full year of consistency. That's what I'm worried about there. But he's got the makings of an all-around great player. He's just got to put it all together. I love the kid's swing. It is gorgeous, and he will be one of the focal points of this offense this year. Yoenis Cespedes, whatever you get out of the guy is gravy at this point. I have no expectations. The Mets, of course, lowered his salary this year to make room for bringing in off-season acquisitions. Jake Marcinek was the center fielder that the Mets brought in, who will be brought in for defensive purposes. But overall, this roster, I think, is pretty strong, and I think the Mets could compete to win the division. Call me crazy. And I know it's a great division. It's very tight. In my opinion, the best division in the sport, but I think the Mets got the talent to do it. It's going to come down to the bullpen and, of course, health. But with that starting rotation, if you could get Noah Syndergaard back to form and Diaz could pitch to the back of his baseball card, and we'll see what Familia could do bouncing back, and, of course, the big acquisition with Betances, the Mets got a lot of talent on this team, and if they could stay close, get to that deadline, and maybe bring in one more big arm in the pen, or a big arm, or a big stick, rather, for the lineup, I do think the Mets have a chance to have a really special season. But I can't wait for the season to start. Spring training's almost underway, and I just wanted to get a video up breaking down the roster and telling you guys my thoughts about the manager and everything else in the Mets world. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.